So we continue with our attempt to understand Rav Dessler and his perspective on the sins of biblical figures. And we spoke about the idea that Rabbi Dessler we need to understand the background, we need to understand the story behind it. He's in a very serious junction in Jewish history. It's after the Shoah. The faith in the rabbis is basically jeopardized, and he needs to strengthen and empower a small group of people who what we will call today Haredim, and he needs to create some kind of a hashkafa that defend them and defend their decisions, and also to try to understand chataim that are mentioned in the Tanakh, and to show how when the Torah says someone chata, doesn't really mean mamash chata like the way we will view it, but rather as something that in his madrega, it considered as something else, but it's really not. So the last thing we spoke about was Reuven, which we, I guess, dedicated much time to try to understand Rav Dessler's opinion. So now take a look at page 162. It's like on the top of the page, it's still Michtav Me'Eliyahu. I know it sounds strange. We don't have 160 pages here, but it's on the page the number is 162. Okay. Okay. So, everyone got it? Everyone got it? Okay, good. Okay, so look at not 162, but like 163. Don't turn the page. Just on the same page, go to the left. Here. And like here. וזה, כן. תודה. Okay, so you go on that page, go down to the second paragraph from the end, כל האומר שלמה. You see כל האומר שלמה? Okay. So, כל האומר שלמה חטא, אינו אלא טועה. נשב היטו את לבבו ללכת, ולא הלך. So, first a little bit of an introduction, and if anyone wants to hear more about Shlomo HaMelech, I don't know if I can do that. I guess I can. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. Tomorrow night I'm speaking at Chorev about Shlomo. Again, about the expectations and the disappointments from Shlomo, but that will be in Hebrew.
Where?
Chorev. Right, a school, Chorev school, for their community. So, the Gemara in Shabbat says, כל האומר שלמה חטא אינו אלא טועה. If you say that Shlomo committed a sin, you are mistaken, like the same thing with Reuven. But the Tanakh states what? ולא היה לבבו שלם כלבב דוד אביו, בדבר הנשים אשר היטו את לבבו. It says clearly in the Tanakh that says that his heart was not as full as David HaMelech. Why? Because his wives deviated his heart, or they caused his heart to deviate. And by the way, and I know he ignores it, there is another Gemara that says, it's the same place, and we all understand, when you want to get a point, you're not necessarily going to quote everything else, but the Gemara says that when Shlomo HaMelech had some kind of a prediction that that's what it will say about him in Tanakh, he says that he would prefer to be menake bivim, meaning to clean up what? Gutters, rather than that the Tanakh will say about him that his heart was deviated, that he deviated from the right path. Okay, but Rav Dessler does not quote it, but rather he says what? He brings the Gemara that says, נשב היטו את לבבו ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים, ולא הלך, but he didn't. פירוש, כולה זו בהנהגתו עם נשב, עד שהיה אפשר להן לבקש להטות, זו כבר נחשבת במדרגת שלמה להטיה גמורה אצלו. Which means really Shlomo HaMelech didn't really was an idol worshipper. But in his madrega, when he allowed them to do whatever they want, it's like that he was an idol worshipper. I guess Rav Dessler did not have any problems with him violating the negative commandment in the Torah in Parashat Shoftim, ולא ירבה לו נשים, ולא ירבה לו סוסים, וכסף וזהב לא ירבה לו מאוד. Okay, so I guess he ignored it, and I guess the Gemara ignored it as well. I just wanted to, by the way, telling you two things. A, I'm not against Rav Dessler. I think he has tremendous meaning to many things. In this subject, I might disagree. A. B, we need to also understand something, which is, I think, important, is that there is no such a thing. The Gemara's opinion is. The Talmud is a compilation of what? Of different opinions. Different opinions, different times, different backgrounds, different surroundings, and different aims in terms of what do they want to accomplish. So you can't have someone say, Gemara, da'at Gemara ikach vekach. It's not halacha. Even in halacha, it's not true. You have debates, and then you have, at the end, you have some kind of a halacha. But that's it. But there is no such a thing, especially in hashkafa. This is the only opinion. So it might be different opinions, different times. But nevertheless, when it comes to Shlomo HaMelech, he wants to prove again that if you think that Shlomo HaMelech was really an idol worshipper, you are wrong. Okay. Now, that's going to be a tough one. ואמרו ז"ל שם, על חטא דוד המלך עליו השלום, and when regarding to David HaMelech, obviously there it's a little bit difficult to explain. I think we did it here. I think we learned, we learned about David and Bathsheba. I think we did it. About David and Bathsheba, it was a long one. And we spoke about the idea that the Torah, the Tanakh describes David HaMelech when he gets the rebuke from Natan HaNavi about the kivsa of the mashal of kivsat harash. David HaMelech says what? Chatati. I committed a sin. Now, look, you know what? I'll just do it for 2 minutes. When we look at the story with David and Bathsheba and Uriah, so we know what the Tanakh says. First and foremost, Natan HaNavi comes to David and he says to him, gives him this mashal about this lamb, and then David says, Chatati. Okay, so first and foremost, obviously Chatati. A. B. We know also that Hashem says to David HaMelech, that David HaMelech was levavo shalem, his heart was full, chutz what? Bidvar Uriah hachiti. Meaning there is no justification to what he did with Uriah. He basically sent Uriah to his death. Okay. And what about Bathsheba? She was a married woman, right? So how do we explain that? So we have many explanations. For example, there was a get. There was a get al safek, right? There was a conditional get, which some soldiers, even today, but definitely back then, they will write a get. They will say, if I don't come back from the war, so the minute before I die, you will be divorced. Why would they do that? Because they didn't want her to be aguna. Okay, good. Now, this is obviously a halachic loophole, but there is a problem with it. What's the problem? The problem is that the get is what? The condition says what? If I don't come back. So first and foremost, when Uriah came back, it was after David was with Bathsheba, which means not only that he was alive, we know for sure that he was alive. How do we know? He came back. Unless it's a clone, it's the same guy. So if he's there, so there is no condition in the get, and if there's no condition in the get, so she is what? She is married. So ma patarta, right? Unless you want to tell me that no, it's a continual condition. So even if he comes for an after, you know what is an after, like for 4 hours, okay, and then he goes back, still the condition is there, and then he died. So lemafrea, retroactively, she was divorced. Yeah, but it says only if he died in war, not that if he was sent to die. Okay, so we obviously have a problem with that as well. And then we have, but look, if this entire thing with Bathsheba was terrible, how come that Hashem allowed Bathsheba to have whom? Shlomo. And Shlomo is the king. Oh, this is a proof that what? That probably this chet nimchalo. I am willing to accept it. But don't tell me that what? That he didn't commit any sins. Okay? This is one of the issues that we have here. Which means, what do you want to say? That there was no sin at all? Or there was no sin that we can understand? Or you want to say there was a sin? There was a transgression? It was horrible? But the power is that he did tshuva. And if he did tshuva, it means what? That everyone else can do tshuva. Meaning God does not close the doors for Baalei tshuva. in a way, it's more powerful. Now, with Uriah Hitti, we also understand why there is no way to do tshuva. Why? He's dead. He's dead. Gamanu, you can't bring him back. So there is no way to do any tshuva on it. With Bathsheba, there might be a way to do tshuva. So what Rav Dessler says, כל היוצא בחילות בדוד גט כריתות כותב לאשתו, so he takes this opinion, that there was a conditional get, ולא הייתה אשת איש כלל, ורק שדעתו לחזור ולקדשה אחר המלחמה. So he wants to claim that what? That the condition in the get is such as that now, let me take a step back. There is a halachic discussion. מה היא באותן הימים? Which means, if a soldier, before he goes to war, he writes a condition in the get and says, if I don't come back, you will be divorced. So now, is she married or not? It depends. The best answer, if a rabbi asks you a question, best way to look smart to say it's the debate. Okay, machloket. Okay, then you will be almost sure that you are correct. So, and if not, you can have a machloket on that answer too. So the thing is like that. Basically, that's what the Gemara asks. Ma hi be'otan hayamim. What's her status in between? Because we don't know if her husband is dead or not. So the Gemara says, according to one, is safek eshet ish, which means what? Like half pregnant? What does that mean? She is married. She's considered as a married woman, or she's not considered as a married woman. If someone give her kiddushin, is she mekudeshet or not? If someone, God forbid, has an affair with her, so she's a married woman who has an affair and she has a child, is a mamzer or not?
But doesn't say here conditional.
Oh, if it's true. No. He's the second child. That's after they got married in the right way. The first one died. The first child died. Yeah.
It says here that the kacha achrei hamelchama, that means it was a real get, not a conditional.
Oh, nachon. That's what Rav Dessler holds like the opinion that says that it's a mamesh get. Now I don't understand. If it's a mamesh get and she is not married, why Natan Navi says to David, what did you do? And David says, Chatati alma. So Rav Dessler says, no, this is exactly the point. In David's Maila, in his Madrega, it was considered as a sin because he was with whom? With someone that basically was married. She's not really married, but she's abisale married. No, yesh pochet. Now, I did it in a dramatic way just to send you a message. I don't know, just say. I understand why he doesn't want to say that David Amelech sinned with a married woman, because most of us will not do that. So David Amelech, the one who composed we know human nature. Human nature, they do it. So David Amelech, who composed Tehillim, who became the king, this is our aspiration for Mashiach. So nu bemet. But in a way, I will tell you that I'm not that surprised. With all due respect, how do we have Malchut? That's from Yehuda and Tamar. Is that the cleanest way to bring children home? No. And then Ruth and Boaz is it's complicated. Ruth came from where? From the Moabites. Moabites are the daughters of Lot. Okay, so that's the first one. Even the first child, the Moabites, without any busha. Me'av, this is for my father. So that's a better way to do it? Shem. With Dinah. Yeah, with Dinah, she married you. So you ask yourself, we did find in our Jewish lineage and history certain things that are surprising. So why do I want to run away from what seems to be the pshat? And even if I can make it delicate. Really, I can make it delicate. Maybe she was a safek eshet ish, and David HaMelech is a king, so he thinks he can do whatever he wants. Beseder, I can understand it. And then he did tshuva. Also, by the way, his tshuva, and I saw a few hands, so I'll get to you in a second. By the way, if you remember the story, she was pregnant. Bathsheba was pregnant because of David, and the son was very sick. And what did he do when he was sick? He davened for him, he cried and all of that. When he died, he stopped. And everyone asked him, like, what are you doing? It's exactly the opposite. And he says, when he was still alive, I tried to bring him back. When he's dead, he's dead. But if you look at it from a political view, David HaMelech should probably daven for him to die. Because this son was basically a mamzer, and B, that was a constant reminder of the Shanda. But David HaMelech is doing exactly the opposite, which means he davens for the child to, let's say, if the child was alive, everyone will call him what? A mamzer, or he will not be able to get married, and it will be a constant thorn in David's eyes. And that, you see how the tshuva, that David HaMelech was sincere. So in my opinion, when I read the narrative, I might take the opinion that she was a safek eshet ish, and David HaMelech saw her, and he was a king, and he will do whatever he wants. Yeah, and there was a moment of weakness on his part, and therefore, after he realized he made a mistake, he did tshuva. Yes.
Why can't the Chet be that he sent Uriah to battle?
No, that's for sure. That's one. The question is, what about the second one? And in addition, if you already mentioned, I'm sorry, David HaMelech, but if you already mentioned that, there is another sin that he did that everyone commented that was a sin, which was what? To count the people. You remember? To count the people, and the Jews were punished. There was a plague. For 3 days, there was a plague. Hashem gave him choices. That's what we say every day in the Filat Apayim. Biyad Hashem epola. Lo biyad Adam, ki biyad Hashem epola. That was when David HaMelech says, you know what, Hashem? You're going to give whatever plague you want. Whatever you want to punish me. But he committed another sin. Okay, yes.
Some say also that he had Ruach HaKodesh, and he knew that he and Bathsheba would be together and have Shlomo. But he acted hurriedly, too soon.
So there is a midrash that says, Achala, before he ate a fruit before it was ripe. Which, this is wonderful, but it means what? That he still ate something that was not belong to him at that moment. Yes, yes.
When they came back from war, they didn't have to remarry, which shows the proof that they weren't really divorced.
So he says, according to the opinion that says that it was mamash a get, they will need to get married after. That's also why we have a problem with this condition. Meaning, even today, we have a problem with this condition because what does it mean? A, at the meantime, and B, when they come back, do they need? Because if you tell me that when they come back they need to marry her, it means that if someone during the war gave her kiddushin, so what, she's safek mekudeshet? So we have too many complications halachically. Anyone else? Yes.
Is this the Rav Dessler or all of these midrashim trying to whitewash the chet of David HaMelech because David HaMelech is so great, trying to erase some of these chashadim?
Sure. That's the point of Rav Dessler, especially not everyone, as we saw before, not everyone agreeing with it. Everyone understands that we're not talking about just you and me. Maybe you is different, but definitely me. But Rav Dessler trying not only to do that, he's trying to say that the chet that is mentioned is not really the chet according to what you think. Which means when it says chata regarding these biblical figures does not mean what you think. And this is the nobility in his analysis. So we said in the beginning, he is trying to build up trust.
Because the Rabbeim told people not to leave during the Shoah.
That was part of it, and also to create what we call emunat chachamim. He was one of the leading voices in creating what we call today das teire. To translate, da'at Torah, which means whatever the rabbi says to you, it can be what kind of cucumber to buy, or who to marry, or what car to buy, or what to invest, and in halacha, and hashkafa, you need to listen to him. And why is that? That's part of it was a reaction, and B, when you are a very small group and you have so many influencers, not talking about the Instagram, the other influences, especially in the 50s and the 60s, you need to create, this is the model, whatever he says goes. So who came up with this idea? It's very interesting. I will tell you just as a side note, because I gave a class about it once, about the Torah. I don't know if here, but I gave it in the shul. It's interesting. הרבי הזקן, הרב זלמן נחמן מילדי, הרב מילדי, הרבי מילדי. So he, Shteo Zalman Miladi, so he says something interesting. He says, I heard that some Hasidim are asking different rabbis in things that are nothing to do with halacha. He says, what does that mean? Since when we do things like that? Interesting. However, when we go to Rav Dessler, that's exactly what Rav Dessler tried to do. Yeah.
I might understand that somebody sins, does tshuva, the sin is erased like he never did it, or he did it, and then he did tshuva.
That's a very, very good question with tremendous debate over it. When you do tshuva, that sometimes the Talmud says that zdonot na'asot lo kischuyot, that things you did intentionally becomes a schuyot. Some people say it's become like shgagot, and some people say that you can totally erase it, and some people can say no, that it's still in the past, but you can derive from it lessons to do something in the future. So choose whatever you want. Okay. לומר שחטאו היה בדקות פנימיות הלב. His sin was like ממש deep in his heart. כאשר העיד דוד בעצמו, לך לבדך חטאתי, והרע בעיניך עשיתי. Now this is a very interesting proof. In order to be intellectually honest, and not only to analyze or to criticize, you also need to look at the proofs. One of the psukim that Rav Dessler brings in order to substantiate his theory that David HaMelech really didn't do anything wrong between Ben Adam, I would say, לחברו, he says in Pasuk in Tehillim, says, לך לבדך חטאתי, והרע בעיניך עשיתי, which means only to you, God, I committed the sin. So it's not between Ben Adam לחברו, but rather Ben Adam למקום. Why? Because, look, in the eyes of the masses, when David HaMelech took Uriah, do you think they cared if she was half married, half not married, there was a get, there was not a get? What do you think will be the headline in the newspapers? Uriah was killed, Bathsheba was taken to David's palace. Zehu. That's what it will say. And therefore it created what? Chilul Shem Shamayim. So David HaMelech comes to Hashem and says in Tehillim, Lecha levadcha chatati, v'hara beinecha, and what is evil in your eyes, asiti. I committed the sin between Ben Adam lamakom. But however, even that proof, which is an interesting one, bemet, it's even a strong one to say, but you can also say that, look, what do you think David HaMelech is going to say? He already knows that he committed the sin between him and Chavero, and now he says to Hashem also, I also committed the sin between me and you. But the word levadcha might suggest a different interpretation. Okay. אבל יש בזה דבר עמוק עוד יותר. Says there is something even deeper than that. כי גם חטא זה לא היה לפי מדרגתו. Even that sin was not according to his מדרגה. כי אומרם ז"ל, לא היה דוד ראוי לאותו מעשה, ולא ישראל ראויים לאותו מעשה העגל, אלא כדי להורות תשובה, ודבר זה עוד יתבהר. Now there is another statement in the Gemara which is very interesting, and I want you to analyze this statement. The statement in the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that David HaMelech לא היה ראוי לאותו מעשה, which means he was not a person that will do something like that. But why did he do that? In order to show tshuva. Says the same thing about Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael was not really in a madrega to do chet ha'egel, but they did it in order to show that you can do tshuva. Now, rega. No, there's something. You become more critical than me. That's scary. No, I hope I'm not such a good teacher. So let's think about it. First and foremost, let's go one by one. First thing, this statement basically says what? That the sin was committed, and it was committed in order to show that if someone else does it, there is a way to go back. There is a way to tshuva. Okay, wonderful. B, it says that in a way, the bchira chofshit was taken away from them. The free will, the ability to choose, was taken away from you. Why? Because lo hayita ra'ui leoto maaseh. You are not in that madrega to sleep with a married woman, but in a way you were pushed to do it. And then the consequence will be what? That you will do tshuva, and you will teach everyone else that if they will do it not by force, even by choice, there is always a way to do tshuva. Now, this is a bit of a problem, and I will tell you that the Midrash is also goes along those lines in one Midrash. The Midrash says that when Yehuda and Tamar, when he saw Tamar, when she pretended to be someone else, in a way the angel pushed Yehuda to her corner, which is interesting. Why do I say interesting? Because you are basically telling me that you are taking one of the fundamentals, the essential principles of human beings, which is Bchira Chofshit, and it was taken away, so Yehuda will be with Tamar. I can tell you one thing. From the conversation between Yehuda and Tamar, it doesn't seem to be that Yehuda was forced to be with her. Okay? And it doesn't seem to be any external forces pushing Yehuda to do what he did. So the thing is that this statement is a very interesting statement. And again, you see from the multiple statements, and some of them that he does not quote, is that obviously the rabbis struggled with the issue of David and Bathsheba. Yes?
You had before David, you had Adam, Cain, Reuben, Yehuda, saying Chatasi in different ways and doing teshuva. They say Reuben was the first one really to do teshuva. But here, in terms of the Malchus, the continuation of the Malchus, when we compare Shaul with David, we see that Shaul did not do teshuva. He never said Chatati. Here with David, we do. So even though we heard it before in Tanakh that other Gedolim have said Chatati and done teshuva, but with David, in terms of the ultimate Mashiach and the continuation of the Malchut, is that possibly why it's again saying that David is the paradigm of teshuva?
It might be. It's a good point. It seems to be that the Gemara goes out of its way in a way to clear his name and to make sure that he's okay. I almost positive that there was an agenda to make sure that David's name is as clear as we can. By the way, not only by Chazal's agenda, it already began where? In Divrei Yamim. When you read Divrei Yamim Chronicles A and B, it's very favorable to Malchut David. Now, because we are getting to Hanukkah, we know how Chazal criticized whom? Hashmonaim. Because they took away David's Malchut, and they took it to themselves, which was not accepted by Chazal, especially not the Ramban. The Rambam had some more tolerance towards it. But if you read the Ramban at the end of Parashat Vayechi, when Yaakov says to Yehuda, לא יסור שבט מיהודה ומחוקק מבין רגליו עד כי יבוא שילה ולא יקרא תמים, basically you say that the Ramban says that because the Hashmonaim took the crown and they became kings, that was the reason for their downfall. Okay, so I think there is no question that David, besides being a biblical figure, also someone that is a king and also is Baal Tehillim. Like, who doesn't know Tehillim? Okay, and you want to tell me that the Tehillim was composed by someone like that? No, bemet. So therefore, you need to try to justify him. Yes.
David did not really view what he did as a sin, which is why Nathan had to give him a mashal to show that he sinned. I think without the mashal, he would not have come to the realization that he sinned.
Okay. So you're saying David HaMelech did not come along after the night, right? He didn't wake up in the morning and says, "Oops, chatati."
Right.
He had the Natan needs to come and tell him. That's true. Now, I will tell you two things. We just don't know kings, Baruch Hashem. But real kings, and that was always a struggle between the prophet and the king. Most of the kings did not like prophets. Many of those prophets found themselves what? Dead or in prison. Okay? Eliyahu, Elisha, Yecheskel, Yirmiyah, Yeshaya. You want a list? Go to Tanakh. Okay? And basically, to stand up against a king and to tell him you are wrong, you need to have a tremendous courage, and also that the king needs to be open for criticism. So I don't think that that David HaMelech thought that he made a mistake at the beginning.
Right.
I agree. I think he says, I'm the king, I can do whatever I want. How do I know that? Open up Shmuel Aleph and Perek Chet, if I'm not mistaken, and Shmuel says to the people, you want a king? Beseder. I'm just telling you what's the list of the things that he can do to you. He can take your children, he can take your fields, he can take your property, he can take your wives, he can do whatever he wants. That's what you want? Labriut. Okay? So in a way, David HaMelech, and this was not a foreign thing, you can take whoever woman you want. זה הכל. So Natan HaNavi comes to him and gives him the mashal, and David HaMelech immediately understands that, there is, the way he reacts to the mashal is very harsh, because it's thievery. For thievery, you pay what? Double or 4 times. You don't call for his death. So David HaMelech was very moved. And then when Natan HaNavi says to him, Ata Aish, you are the man, so obviously David HaMelech realized he did something wrong. So you can ask me, how did he didn't know that he did something wrong? I guess he didn't. He didn't do something wrong.
Didn't think of it as something wrong.
No. So now, okay, so that's, now turn the page. It's time to turn the page. Well, not to turn the page, just flip it. Okay. מצאנו דבר נפלא, ראוי להבינו על בוריו. The page starts with 164. The first word is מצאנו. We found a beautiful thing, ראוי להבינו על בוריו. We should understand it clearly. Okay. הנה, קין נביא היה. Cain was a prophet. כי שמע קול השם כמו אדם הראשון. Because he heard God's voice, like Adam. When did he hear God's voice?
When Hashem said, where's your brother? No?
Before he killed Hevel. When he brought the lousy sacrifice, Hashem says to him, למה חרה לך ולמה נפלו פניך? הלא אם תיטיב שאת, ואם לא תיטיב לפתח חטאת רובץ. נכון? He says, why are you so upset? Why am I upset? My sacrifice was rejected, but you don't need to be that upset. Next time, don't worry, don't bring something so lousy. And next time, you always have a second chance. Don't be mad. And Cain obviously didn't listen. Okay. So, ויש להתפלא. אפילו אחר שקינא באחיו קנאה רעה, וקם עליו רוצחו נפש, עדיין נשאר בנבואתו, כדכתיב ויאמר השם אל קין, אהיה עבד אחיך. So now he's asking a good question. He says, רגע, I don't understand. Before the murder, so Hashem spoke to Cain, בסדר. But after Cain murdered his own brother, Hashem continued to what? To talk to him. How come that he didn't lose his ability to be a prophet? A prophet can be a murderer? So he says, דבר יש בו סוד עמוק. אם נעמוד עליו, יצא לנו ביהור, בהיר ומרחיק לכת. בכל אופי ההבדל שבין דורות הראשונים ודורות האחרונים בפנימיותם. Basically, Rav Dessler wants to draw a distinction between the early generations and the current generations in terms of our madrigot, our levels, our spiritual levels. And it all derives from this question now, how can you explain that Hashem speaks to what? To a murderer. So he says like that. מצאנו בדברי הגר"א ז"ל, so we found in the Vilna Gaon's writing, ראשונים נתגלה עוונם, נתגלה קיצם. מעשיהם הטובים טמונים ועוונותיהם גלויים, כי ליבם היה טוב. ואחרונים להפך, ורחמנא ליבא. So the Gemara in Yoma says, ראשונים, meaning the early generations, נתגלה עוונם, their sins was revealed, and also their end was revealed. And their good deeds are hidden, and their sins are exposed. Why? Because their heart was good. But us, current generations, exactly the opposite. Our sins are hidden, our good deeds are exposed, and we try to hide our sins and not to reveal them. What does that mean? So, נראה לפרש, הנה על פי ניסיוננו אנו, רואים אנו בעצמנו, ששכלנו מקיף הרבה מאוד מגדלות הבורא ומחיובי האדם, עד שאם היו כל ידיעותינו הרחבות יוצאות לפועל, בוודאי היינו נעשים צדיקים גמורים, חדורים יראת השם ואהבתו ודבקים בו לגמרי. He says, we have tremendous knowledge about Hashem, about the Torah, today especially with computers and everything. You know, we know probably in terms of knowledge or access to knowledge more than anyone in previous generations. We can have all together on the same screen, and we can make an analysis and synopsis and all of that. We in a way have more knowledge, so therefore you would think that with more knowledge we will be more righteous, more pious. But he says, אבל למעשה, but actually, הרינו רואים שאין אנו צדיקים גמורים. We're not exactly צדיקים גמורים, הרי ודאי שיש טמטום הלב שחוסם בפני הידיעות שלא תיכנסנה ללב לפעול שם על שורשי המעשה, ועל כן, כשהיצר מתעורר לחטא, נקל לו לטשטש ולאחות את ידיעותינו ולגרום לנו שנעלים עין מהם. ונטעה את עצמנו שאין חטא זה כל כך רע, אינו מתנגד לגמרי למה שידוע לנו לטוב. So basically he says there is a disconnect between what we know and what we do. We might know more than previous generations, but in terms of not being able to stand up against the Yetzer Hara, not only that we are not as strong as they used to be, we also in a way justified because we know so much. And as I said, every she'ela yesh machloket. So am I allowed to do it on Shabbat? I'm sure there is an opinion that says yes, right? Somewhere, I'll find it after Shabbat. So the thing is that even though we have more knowledge, we have in a way less commitment to what? To stand up against Yetzer Hara. וכיוון שהסיתנו כך לעבור כמה כבר פעם או שתיים, and because we already succumbed or we submitted ourselves to Yetzer Hara once or twice, הנה כבר נעשה לנו כהיתר גמור, so it becomes what? היתר, ושוב אינו בניגוד כלל עם ידיעותינו. So then we don't even feel the conflict between what we know and what we do. אבל הדורות הראשונים לא היו כאלה. The early generations were not like that. הם עלו למדרגה של ביטול הטמטום. וכל ידיעותיהם חדרו ממילא אל ליבותם. They might knew less, but everything they knew infiltrate their hearts. ועל כן חיו את חייהם על רמה גדולה מאוד של דבקות בקונם. So therefore they attach themselves to God. By the way, as a side note, ממש side note, the Abarbanel, who lived in the 15th century in Spain, and he was expelled and all of that, he, in his writings, he says that most of the Jews who were simple Jews did not convert to Christianity in 1492. And Dafka, the sophisticated Jews, many of them converted. That's interesting. Dafka, as we say, punk fakert, afuch. Meaning, because they are so sophisticated, they were able to justify it. No, nish, kacha, not exactly Trinity. Yes, Trinity, at home I'll light candles. But the simple Jews said, okay, we are not converting. If we are expelled, and if we are die, we die. We believe in one God. We don't know how to manipulate the issue. So, he says, ואם כן, איך באו לידי חטא? So, if you tell me that they glued themselves to their creator, meaning the early generations, and they were attached to God, so how can you explain what? That they committed sins. So he says, משום שכללו במלחמת היצר, because there is a principal rule when we fight the evil inclination, כל הגדול מחברו, יצרו גדול ממנו. More righteous you are than the other guy, the יצר הרע is going to want to be stronger. כי הרי בכל מדרגה צריך להיות בחירה, because you need to have a free choice. ואם אי אפשר ליצר להצליח בדרך ההטעה, and if the יצר הרע cannot win or cannot confront you by deceiving you, אז מתגבר בדרך תוקף הרצון סתם לעשות נגד מה שגלוי לשכלו. כי כוח היצר גדול כל כך שאפשר לו להסיתו באופן זה, ובזה חזר המשקל הבחירה למקומו. Which means he wants to say that in the early generations, the יצר הרע will confront them directly. Meaning not like in a deception, like what we do, what he does to us, that we think that we are doing a mitzvah. They knew that what they do is wrong. But the Yetzer Hara was so strong that they, in a way, lost the battle. And then he says, I will say my comments about it in a minute. ואם אז קרה And it's all in order to maintain the what? The free choice in balance. Meaning, if I am so pious, the Yetzer Hara obviously needs to be what? Stronger. And then he says, ואם אז קרה פעם שגבר היצר בדרך זו, אחר כך בסור היצר, ביודעם ערך הטעם שהיה גלוי לפניהם ולא ניחא על ידי הטעה, אז שווים בתשובה גמורה, והיה נתגלה עוונם נתגלה קיצם. כי בהיות עוונם גלוי, תשובתם קרובה, וגם קיצם קרוב וצפוי מראש. Which means, immediately after the Yetzer Hara left, they realized immediately that they did what? That they did something wrong. And they didn't try to what? To sugarcoat it. Oh, זה קצת, כן, מותר, לא מותר. It's, no. It was a chet, and therefore they immediately did tshuva. They didn't let it linger, and then to forget about it. They immediately addressed it. And then he says, אבל האחרונים שליבם תמיד בסתירה עם השכל, but we, the current generations, that we always are so terrible, וצפוי מאוד, אבל יצרה מתרץ את הסתירה תמיד ומיישבה על ידי הטעה. So now, after we committed the sin, we justify it. So if we justify it, obviously we don't see it as a sin. And if we don't see it as a sin, we cannot do tshuva. Okay? So then he says, it sounds perfect, but we're going to break it. So, עד שאין ברור להם מה חטא, מה אינו חטא, מה מצווה, מה עבירה. והיינו שהחטא מכוסה והאדם רחוק מתשובה. כמו שכתב רבינו בשערי תשובה, אין איש ניחם על רעה לאמור מה עשיתי. וזה לא נתגלה עוונם, לא נתגלה קיצם. So because we don't know that we committed a sin, obviously we cannot what? End it. We cannot do tshuva. וקין שחטא בדרך הראשונים חטא. So when Cain committed a sin, so he did it like the ראשונים, like the early generations, which means שנכשל לפני תוקף רצון היצר. Meaning the יצר הרע confronted him and he submitted himself to it. אבל אחר כך כששר היצר ממנו, הרי השגתו הנבואית במקומה הייתה, וחזר בתשובה, וגם מצאנו שהעולם נבנה ממנו שאשתו של נוח מקין הייתה. So he says, Cain immediately did tshuva, and we see that Noach, that was born from Cain, Noach's wife, that was born from Cain, so they immediately rejuvenated the world, and you see that he obviously was worthy to do it. You know what? What do you think? I'm not going to give you my opinion yet.
I mean, he's saying what they felt, what they did, whatever. He has no idea, or I'm saying professor, but he has no idea what was going on inside, and whoever they were, why they did it and how they did it. And he's giving reasonings what they did, whether it was right or not. And that in itself is a whole issue. He's
Okay.
judging.
Okay.
That's in that basis.
Okay, very good. One aspect. זהו? You're all good with that? Yes.
To me, it's all just retroactive justification. They're human beings. I'm not saying they were on higher levels, greater in many respects. A lot of sins. And the whole history from the beginning of Bereshit, it's almost like the lesson for us. Every one of the Avos and their families were totally dysfunctional. So if you're dysfunctional, don't feel so bad because they weren't such good parents and they weren't such good. That's the way they
Okay,
were.
very good. We spoke about that, I think, before you joined. We spoke about that little bit, the idea, Ramban, Midrashim, and others basically says what? No, they did something wrong, and we're not going to cover it, but you can learn from what they did and grow from it. Yes? Oh, good. So now we have a concept of what we call itma'atut adorot, that the generations decline. However, we also have a pasuk in Shlomo HaMelech that says in Mishlei, אל תאמר שהימים הראשונים היו טובים מאלה, למה? כי לא מחוכמה שאלת על זה. Which means, we all like to be nostalgists. It's called in Hebrew nostalgia, okay? We all like nostalgia. Oh, לפני 50 שנה, everyone was religious. In Europe, כולם היו דתיים. Nonsense. זה ממש nonsense. That's not true. There was a concentration of many religious, pious, good Jews, but most of them were not. Look at the 18th century and the 19th century and look at the numbers and the names and you will understand that they were not that religious. Oh, the אווירה בקירות. Yeah, the environment of religion was in the walls of the house. For that, by the way, I can agree a little bit more. there is a very, very famous article by Chaim Soloveitchik, I can't say the word. Rapture? I don't know. Meaning like shever? Shever. What is a shever? A rupture? Okay? And something like that. Whatever. He speaks about the rupture. Thank you. He speaks about the idea of the transformation of the Jewish community, that from back then in Europe, that most of the mothers didn't work, and you could feel the Judaism in the house, rather than to the modern Orthodox communities that, both parents work, and, sometimes you are raised by the nanny, and the nanny is not necessarily, she might be a pious lady, but she's not from our tribe, and all of that, and basically you need to have a different educational system. So it's a fascinating article. There are some revisions to what he says, whatever. But the idea is to think that early generations were much better than us in their DNA. I can agree with the Darderut Adorot in terms of knowledge. Yes. Not talking about information, talking about knowledge. The Rambam already talks about it also. For example, the Rambam in Ilchot Sanhedrin, in Perek Kavdaled Halacha Aleph, he says that back then a judge could judge without witnesses. He can judge, he can listen to you, he can listen to her, and then he judge by himself, no witnesses, and also he can count on a woman or a child who tells him, look, this guy is a liar, and if he trusts the child or the woman, it's fine. Now, don't get too excited, okay? By the way, he learns it from whom? From Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech made this decision based on what? On he omeret vehi omeret. She said and she says, and that he made a decision. No witnesses, no nothing. That's why the people were scared from his wisdom. Now, however, in Halacha Bet he says, Kol ze haya bizmanam. But today, the Batei Dinim are not that reuim, the Batei Dinim are not that great, and the Dayanim are not that great, so we are going to use what? Witnesses and all of that. However, he still says, ve'af al pichen, he says, if the Dayan trusts someone who tells him something and he knows that the two guys who claim are liars, he says he needs to schlep the din somehow and to convince the claimers to admit that they are liars. Okay, so somehow. But I understand that. I have no problems with it.
In our system of halacha, we give greater credence to Mishnah over Gemara, over the Tanaim, over Amoraim. How do you justify that?
Good. Very good questions. Question says, we know in the Gemara, for example, Amora cannot dispute a Tana. Right? Rishon will not dispute a Gaon. So first and foremost, we know that there are many exceptions to it. And also it depends, how do you define yourself? For example, the Rambam, who lived in the 12th century, which obviously will bring him into the category of Rishon. He, many times in Mishneh Torah Rambam, disputes whom? The Geonim.
But those are the exceptions.
Why? Because the Rambam calls himself Gaon. Why? Because who is the one to determine when a time period is over? Meaning Rabbi Yochanan, Rav, Shmuel, Rav Huna, Rav Chizda, Rav Nachman, all of them. Did they know that they are Amoraim?
No.
Vadai shelo. Right? Rabbi Yochanan lived his life as Rabbi Yochanan. Now, he knew there is a Rabbi, there was Rabban Gamliel, there was Rabbi Meir, right? Especially Rabbi Yochanan, I pick on him because he died when he was 92 years old. He died in 278, so he saw Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, he saw them. He was a child, but he saw them, so he knows what greatness is. But even Rabbi Yochanan, and definitely the first generation Amoraim, Rav, Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Rav for sure, they did not see so much the line between them and the Tanaim. Rav, Tanahu, Ufalig. לא כל כך בטוח. Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan as well, they also looked at the Mishnah as something that it's not holy. One of the examples are Chasure Michsera veHachiktani. What does that mean? The Mishnah is missing something and let me fill it up. Which means I can do it. Meaning, interfering with the code of the Mishnah, you need to see yourself as someone who who can do it. Now, I agree. We do have in halacha those status. However, read the Hakdama of Rav Ovadia to Yechavedat, or to Yabi Omer, and look at the Nodab Yehuda, and look at Reb Moshe and many others, who says, look, we definitely have tremendous respect, but if I think that my svara is better and I can find this svara in other Rishonim, I, as an Acharon, can rely on those Rishonim and debate this Rishon. Chazon Ish, for example, in his Perush LaMishnayot, debated Rishonim. So you can say that those are the exceptions, or you can say those are the exceptions because most of the times we agree with them. Because if not, you are basically, what's the, there is always what they call midron talul, the slippery slope. There is slippery slope on both ends, which means if you tell me that that's it, it's stuck, so halacha cannot be viable. Meaning, if I'm going to say something that they didn't say, or I'm going to dispute them, and I can't do that, so what will be? Now, how do you do it? What's the framework that you use? Not like nir'a li, margish li, I think like, I feel like, I'm talking about what? You bring re'ayot, you bring svarot, you bring other opinions. That's what Rav Ovadia, I think he says, וכל אלה המצפצפים, the tweet,
tweet, yeah.
כל אלו המצפצפים בקולם, לאמור שאין לנו לחלוק על דברי ראשונים, דברי רב והבל המה, and that was our tradition always, that and then he brings up Plato. He says, חביבים עליי דברי רבי, אבל האמת חביבה עליי מכולם. That's what Ovadia brings, Plato. So the idea is, you are correct, there is tremendous respect to early generations. However, if there is something that we need to debate, we will debate. Now, okay. No, next week we'll do something. 1 second. I think I have 1 minute. One more thing. You know what? For next week, think about it. Rav Dessler talks about the fact that Cain did tshuva. Where exactly Cain did tshuva? יפה. Cain says, Gadol avoni minso. Rega. Many commentators look at that as Gadol avoni minso. Now, I'm giving you a different reading. Gadol avoni minso. And that's what the Midrash says. Shlosha ba'u be'alila. 3 biblical figures came with a conspiracy. One of them is Cain. I'll tell you about the other 2 maybe next time. Cain comes to Hashem and says, what? You're going to punish me? But you can't carry on my sin? You're going to kill me because of what I did? What? You can't forgive me? And Hashem says, I'll forgive you. Why? Because the original punishment was what? Na vanad tiyeh ba'aretz. After the tshuva, it's only what? Nad. That's it. There is no na. Which means the tshuva did something, but it was a tshuva of pushing God to the corner. Which means what? If you can't forgive me, you are not a true God. Okay, I'll give it to you now, just for the minute. I'm sorry. I'll just need to finish it and then run to Mincha. Who else did the same thing, same tshuva, very similar tshuva? A king. You are close to Chizkiyahu. Very close to him. Like 1 generation after him, like his son. Menashe, when they put him in a boiling pot, he davened to all the idols, and then he says, oh, you know what, I remember my father taught me that when I'm in troubles, I should reach out to God. So he says to God, God, if you are the true God, you would listen to me and you will save me. So the ministering angel says to God, what are you doing? Don't listen to him, obviously, that's not tshuva. And Hashem says, what? If I'm not going to listen to him, Balei Tshuva will say, oh, God does not listen to us. So what did he do? He dug a tunnel, whatever that means, okay? And he brought Menashe underneath his holy throne, and he gave him, and he accepted his tshuva and brought him back to his kingdom. Oh, according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says, Gam yesh lo olam haba. Why? Because it says, Vayashev oto lemalchuto. Tanna Kama says, lemalchuto velo laolam haba. Because the Mishnah starts, 4 מלכים ו3 הדיוטות אין להם חלק לעולם הבא. And one of the מלכים is מנשה, according to Tanna Kama. Rav Yehuda says, no, יש לו חלק לעולם הבא. That's a Gemara Sanhedrin. So now, that was Menashe. So we have Cain, Menashe, and there is one more. And even, he's not mentioned there, but I will say it, but I need to run to Mincha. Eliyahu Hanavi also did to Hashem something very similar. Ima Baal, Ima Carmel mountain. He basically says to Hashem what? You must show that I am the true prophet and you are the true God. You must accept the sacrifice. He didn't give God too much of choice. Same thing with Eliyahu when he did the drought. Okay, because you remember the story. Achav says to him, you think that really that Chiel's children died because he built Jericho? Eliyahu says, sure. And he says to him, are you kidding me? You know, Moshe says that what? That there is going to be a drought if we will worship idols. And we worship idols everywhere. So Eliyahu says to Hashem, what? You need to show him that when you say something, you mean it. So you need to bring a drought. And he brought a drought. So the idea is, Shabbat Shalom, we'll see you next week.